Welcome everyone to the Service Enterprise Hub information session. We hope to give you great information about what's involved if you were to be interested in becoming a Service Enterprise Hub with Points of Light. My name is Sarah Jane Foltz. People call me SJ. I'm the Director of Capacity Building for Points of Light, and I have the distinct pleasure of managing this program in partnership with our amazing network of hubs and independent trainers across the United States. So thank you for joining us today, and I'd like to turn it over to Tracy, who is our program, she's my right hand, and she helps consult and support the program and our hubs and our amazing network of consultants. And I'll let her introduce herself and then begin sharing more about Service Enterprise.
Thanks, SJ. Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Lato-Smith. I'm coming to you from Colorado today. I have a business called Volunteer Management Consulting, and I have the pleasure of working with Points of Light as the consultant specifically for the Service Enterprise program. So I'm excited to talk to you today about the possibility of becoming a Service Enterprise Hub. So let's start with why. Why become a Service Enterprise Hub? We know that 1 in 4 Americans volunteer their time, talents, and energy to make a difference in their community. We also know through Points of Light research conducted in 2020 that 87% of Americans report that they will make time in their busy schedules to volunteer when they find the opportunities worthwhile. And Points of Light research digs in deeper into what that worthwhile opportunity means to folks. We also know that 65% of millennials donate skilled labor that requires training or experience. So they're coming to their volunteer roles and sharing their skills and expertise. And we're also noticing trends that volunteers are looking to partner with staff and organizations rather than simply be supervised. And they sometimes even want to be empowered to lead the effort if their expertise in some cases is greater than what staff has in certain areas. So volunteers are looking for lots of new and different ways to engage with organizations they find valuable. So why become a Service Enterprise Hub? You'll have the opportunity to strengthen the civic sector through the power of volunteers, to lead your community and the organizations in your community to success in the ways that they serve your community, and support change management and capacity building for organizations to better leverage volunteers. That's what Service Enterprise is all about and what you have the opportunity to be a part of as a Service Enterprise Hub. So let's dive into what exactly is a Service Enterprise. A Service Enterprise is an organization that doesn't just engage volunteers, it operates with a culture of volunteerism. And that enables that organization to fundamentally leverage volunteers and their skills to achieve that organization's social mission. So these are high-performing organizations that have deeply integrated volunteers into their strategic plan and their day-to-day operations. And that helps them to reduce costs, increase efficiency and effectiveness in the ways that they provide services to fulfill their missions. So this goal of the Service Enterprise program is to strengthen the capacity of organizations to strategically and effectively engage volunteers to address organizational and community needs. And I'll get into the nuts and bolts of the Service Enterprise program in a minute here, but I think the best takeaway here is that Service Enterprise is not a volunteer management training program. If you're looking to become a hub, you probably do some volunteer management training as part of your service offerings already, or there are similar programs that offer volunteer engagement training in your community. Service Enterprise is a change management program. It's really focused on the value and benefits of engaging volunteers in meaningful and mission-focused ways. So learning and employing best practices in volunteer engagement are an important part of the roadmap to becoming or helping organizations become certified Service Enterprise organizations. But the program itself is about supporting organizations, and we should say not just the volunteer managers, but this is really key, executive directors and other senior leaders to change the way that they and their organizations think about volunteers and the potential that volunteers hold for improving their organization's operations and strategic plans for addressing community needs. So that's what Service Enterprise is about in a nutshell. We'd like to get started with a brief video about the Service Enterprise program. So I'm going to share my audio.
So you're sitting at your desk and you're reviewing your list of tasks for the day. With each hour that passes, you mark one task off and yet two more appear. You talk with your team, you talk with your boss, and everyone is having the same problem. As you look at your to-do list, you worry that you're not spending your time efficiently. Some of your responsibilities are foreign to you, and you feel like you're building a bicycle and riding it at the same time. Next month, you have to complete your department's annual budget. You carve out an hour every day to focus on it, but you're distracted by other projects, and math is not your strong suit. You think of your neighbor Sandra, an accountant, and wish she would suddenly appear to take on the responsibility. Now, consider she could appear. Imagine that Sandra, or someone like Sandra, had a role built into your organization to use her specific skill set to serve your organization. With her help, you would focus on what you're good at. You would feel like the work your team is doing is making a tangible contribution to your organization's mission, the same mission that attracted you to join the organization. By engaging Sandra and other skill-based volunteers, your organization could operate as a service enterprise. A service enterprise is an organization that fundamentally leverages volunteers and their skills to achieve its social mission. This means engaging volunteers in every area of your work, from direct service to operations to administration. Research conducted by TCC Group and Deloitte demonstrates that nonprofits operating as service enterprises outperform peer organizations on all measures of organizational capacity, thereby allowing these organizations to more effectively address community needs and operate at almost half the median budget. When an organization leverages volunteers and achieves an effective volunteer management model, not only do they lead and manage their organizations better, but they are also significantly more adaptable, sustainable, and better resourced to do their work, and therefore able to sustainably go to scale. Research conducted by Deloitte identified the following 10 characteristics as consistent and critical practices for nonprofit service enterprises. Planning and development. Developing a strategy and infrastructure for mission-driven volunteer engagement. Leadership support. Demonstrated executive commitment to volunteer engagement. Resource allocation. Allocation of resources, time, money, human capital, and tools to volunteer engagement. Tracking and evaluation. Determining service value, tracking volunteer retention, assessing the quality of volunteer experiences, and monitoring the outputs and outcomes of volunteers in meeting the mission of the organization through a volunteer tracking system. Outreach. Ongoing outreach and volunteer recruitment to sustain ongoing volunteer engagement. Funding. Fund development for volunteer engagement. Effective training. Train volunteers and the employees that manage them to effectively fill their positions. Onboarding and supervision. Matching volunteers to appropriate positions, clarifying their roles, orienting and supporting them throughout their time with the organization. Technology and communication. Using best practices in technology and communication to enhance volunteer engagement. Partnering to extend reach. Creating a participatory and mutually beneficial relationship with the community to increase community engagement and reach. The Service Enterprise Initiative is a California volunteer social innovation inspired by reimagining service and led by Points of Light. The Service Enterprise Initiative strengthens the capacity of organizations through a comprehensive research-based assessment, training, coaching, and certification model. Organizations introducing the initiative to agencies in their community are witnessing fundamental changes to how they are strategically engaging volunteers. This initiative is a collaborative effort made possible with the innovative leadership of California volunteers, California Volunteer Centers, the Corporation for National and Community Service, Points of Light, and the dedication of TCC Group, Algorithm, Deloitte, and RGK Center for Philanthropy and Community Service. To learn more about this initiative, go to www.pointsoflight.org/service-enterprise-initiative.
All right. Or to learn more about this initiative, you can just stick around on this webinar. All right, so you got a little bit of information and an overview of what Service Enterprise is all about there. I wanted to provide a very brief history of how this came about, and then we'll talk about some of the research in which the program is based. So the Service Enterprise Initiative began back in 2009 based on research that was conducted through a national cross-sector coalition called Reimagining Service. And they worked with the TCC Group and Deloitte, which you heard about in that video. And research was identified that ultimately brought into focus the guiding principles and characteristics of what would ultimately be called service enterprise. So you saw the characteristics in that video. We'll revisit that, and we'll also go through those guiding principles in just a moment. In 2011, California Volunteers, which is the California State Service Commission, worked with local volunteer centers to design a curriculum and a supporting program that could replicate the research to help organizations move toward becoming what would be called certified service enterprises. So then in 2012, with funding from the Corporation for National and Community Service, which is now AmeriCorps, funding from CNCS to California Volunteers, and planning and development support from Points of Light, who now administers the program, plus the RGK Center at the University of Texas, Austin, and the TCC Group. The Service Enterprise Program was developed or further developed, and then it was piloted in California in 2013. And it included a research-based assessment tool called the Service Enterprise Diagnostic, or SED, which was created by Algorithm. So to date, Points of Light has certified and recertified over 660 organizations and is able to offer this program in every state of the country. So that's a little bit of the history. Let's dive a little deeper into the research that I referenced there. So I mentioned that there are 4 guiding principles for the Service Enterprise Program. The first principle is about the volunteer ecosystem. And we recognize that the volunteer ecosystem as a whole in our society is more effective when all sectors participate in its evolution. So volunteerism doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't exist in a single sector. And the responsibility for successful volunteer engagement lives beyond nonprofits alone. We often think about only nonprofits when we think of the volunteer ecosystem. But faith-based organizations, school districts, corporations, sports groups, philanthropy, government, and nonprofits all have a really important role to play in achieving better outcomes for our communities. There's no one portion of that field that can lead this evolution totally on its own. We all have to be part of adopting and supporting more effective practices for volunteer engagement. The second principle is to make volunteer engagement a core strategic function of organizations, not an add-on, a separate program, but core to the organization's functions and operations. So engaging volunteers effectively can help an organization serve more people in the community, as well as change the core economics of an organization. And that can allow it to scale more quickly and in a really cost-effective way. But very often, volunteers aren't engaged in strategic ways that add value to the organization. So an example of this is that we typically think of the volunteer program, right? Rather than thinking about how to integrate volunteers into all aspects of our organization's work. So when we think about it this way, we often think about the volunteer program as a program that can easily be cut or ignored, and not as something that's a critical function. Put it this way, most organizations that have a development department would not think of getting rid of their fundraising arm when times get tough. But the resources that support volunteers are often some of the first to go. Being a service enterprise means thinking differently about that and making volunteer engagement core. The third principle is to focus volunteer engagement on true community needs. Rather than just responding to the supply of volunteers, we want organizations to identify key priorities in the community and then purposefully seek out volunteers who have the skills to address those priorities. Very often, we let the supply of volunteers dictate how we engage them, when really those community needs are what should dictate the activities of volunteers. So this is true for the volunteer who comes in off the street or finds us online, or the group of corporate volunteers that your organization partners with on a one-time or regular basis. We want to make sure that the projects that we identify for them to participate in are truly meaningful and meeting community needs, rather than repainting the fence that a group of volunteers painted last week. Finally, the fourth guiding principle tells us that in order to get a return, you have to invest. That's not rocket science, that's a basic economic principle. But organizations that make volunteers central to their work and manage them well can see 3 to 6 times their return on investment. So this is a really smart way to maximize impact, but it does require upfront and ongoing financial investment in volunteer engagement. We need funders who believe that funding volunteer engagement helps organizations achieve their broader missions to raise their voices so that the funding community can learn from their stories as well. So those are the guiding principles of the Service Enterprise Program. So let's go back to the research. Using the research that they identified, the TCC Group looked deeper at the top performers in volunteer management and 4 other core capacities: leadership, adaptability, management, and technical capacities, as well as broader organizational culture. And what they found was that only about 11% of organizations were considered what statisticians and researchers call positive deviants. So they changed the name for these positive deviants who are these top performers, to a more appealing term of service enterprises. And the researchers discovered 5 critical pieces of information about these positive deviants, or these service enterprises. So here are the key findings for service enterprises. The first is that if you manage volunteers well, you're likely doing lots of other things well in your organization also. All organizational capacities are significantly and markedly stronger for nonprofits with a strong volunteer management model. The second key finding is that organizations that use any number of volunteers and manage them well exhibit much stronger leadership and management behaviors. And in addition to being better led and managed, service enterprises are significantly more adaptable, sustainable, and capable of going to scale, as you heard in that video. And that's what most organizations aim to do in order to serve more people in their community, right? The fourth key finding is that service enterprises have strong and well-developed human resource practices. Makes sense, right? Volunteers are human resources. So most service enterprises viewed volunteers as unpaid human capital or volunteer employees. So there wasn't this major distinction between staff and volunteers. This means they invest the time to define the work that needs to be done by volunteers, recruit specifically for that work, train their volunteers, provide adequate supervision and resources, recognize the results that they produce, and promote volunteers to leadership roles and responsibilities within the organization. Finally, the last key finding is an interesting one as it gets to the economic value of volunteers. The research showed that organizations that engage volunteers are equally as effective as their peers without volunteers, but at almost half the median budget. So building off the research, Reimagining Service and then Points of Light looked at these high-performing organizations to understand how and why they achieved their results, and identified 10 characteristics as consistent and critical practices for nonprofit service enterprises. So all 10 of these characteristics, which you learned about in the video there, are important to being a service enterprise, but 3 of them are vital to the success of any service enterprise. And these top 3 hallmark characteristics are planning and development, leadership support, and effective training. So let's talk briefly about some of the benefits for organizations of becoming a service enterprise, starting with the opportunity for organizations to increase their capacity and their impact on the community through using skilled volunteers. So the process of becoming a service enterprise organization gives organizations the ability to look at internal staff capacity in a new and different way and leverage volunteers and skilled volunteers to expand that capacity to achieve your mission. So our data shows that 80% of certified service enterprises report an increase in both general volunteers and skills-based volunteers, which leads to increased capacity. And the program helps organizations both identify and address their true needs, and then to integrate volunteers throughout their operation. Service enterprises also have a record of impact. The initial Reimagining Service Council did research showing that for every $1 invested in volunteer engagement, a service enterprise organization would receive $3 to $6 return on that investment. And we continue to see that impact and return on investment with service enterprises today through the certification applications that we receive. Nonprofit organizations calculate what we call our return on volunteer investment. So we have really great impact data that communicates the impact of service enterprise. Because every organization that certifies and then recertifies is required to calculate that return on volunteer investment. Finally, 92% of service enterprise organizations said that they were better equipped to engage volunteers to meet their mission, and 99% indicated that they had more effective volunteer practices following service enterprise. That improved their efficiency in the ways that they streamline the process from start to engagement between interested prospective volunteers in the community and productive volunteers working to help them achieve their mission. So a little bit now about the service enterprise model and process. What does it look like for organizations that go through the process? And then we'll talk about what it looks and feels like to be a hub that administers this process for organizations. So the service enterprise model is a holistic and customized change management approach to help organizations gain a greater return on volunteer investment and to help them better achieve their missions. So those pieces are really important, that it is holistic. It is not solely focused on volunteer management practices, but it looks at the whole of the organization's operations, and it's customized to meet the needs and coach organizations specifically based on where they start and where they're headed in their transformation to become a service enterprise organization. So the service enterprise model really aims to help organizations with a few things. Help them create a culture of volunteerism through change management. That often means changing attitudes throughout the organization about what volunteers are capable of and can be trusted with, and what's possible when you engage volunteers in meaningful ways. It aims to help organizations build capacity by engaging volunteers throughout the organization. The process also engages senior leadership, as I mentioned, from the very beginning of the process. And that is a requirement and an expectation that senior leadership participates in this process. Otherwise, an organization cannot be certified if this is not something that is not only supported by, but moved forward with the participation of senior leadership. We also aim to measure organizational readiness accurately using a statistically valid research-based assessment tool. So that's that diagnostic tool, the Service Enterprise Diagnostic, or SED, that helps us determine and helps organizations determine where they're starting from as they map out their journey to becoming a service enterprise. Organizations receive training and coaching towards certification, and they also gain experience through cross-sector learning with peer group cohorts. So the goal is that hubs will facilitate this program in cohorts of 3 to 8 organizations, and those organizations learn from one another throughout this process as well. So here's what the process looks like. It is essentially a 7-step process, starting with an organization completing an application and a readiness assessment conducted by the hub, and then attending an orientation. So the actual application online takes about 30 minutes for an organization to complete. But even before they receive the link to the application from the hub has some communication with that organization to really assess how ready they are for this type of intensive program. The next step is that orientation, which is a 2-hour orientation that can be either in person or virtual, and that's led by the hubs, and it's an introduction to service enterprise and the entire program. After that is the SED, that Service Enterprise Diagnostic. So this is an online statistically valid assessment tool that evaluates an organization's volunteer engagement practices. So the SED is this key tool that helps organizations get a baseline understanding of where their organization's volunteer engagement practices are and how they can improve them to become a service enterprise. The diagnostic is completed by a cross-section of the organization, and the hub coaches the organization to determine how many people and who specifically within the organization, staff, volunteers, board members, should take the SED based on the size and scope of the organization. Following that diagnostic, which usually is completed by all of the respondents within a period of about 2 weeks, the hub schedules a 2-hour SED debrief with the organization. So after that SED is complete, a report is generated, and the hubs meet with each organization one-on-one, one organization with the hub at a time, to review their team's SED results and facilitate a really robust discussion of the current state in the organization and where they'd like to go during their service enterprise. So lots of great initial ideas come up in those SED debriefs about processes they have in place that they'd like to improve, that they'd like to maintain, that they'd like to create, and how they might get there, how they might go about doing that. Next is the training and coaching phase, and training is first. So next in the process, there's the service enterprise training, which is about 15 hours delivered in either 7 virtual sessions or 4 in-person sessions, or some hybrid combination of those determined by the hubs. In these sessions, organizations look at things like building board support in their organizations for volunteering, determining their return on volunteer investment, defining roles that volunteers can play that have never been considered before, and identifying ways to evaluate and report back on their progress. So it really is focused largely on change management with a lens of volunteer engagement. Next is the coaching phase. So after the training is complete, organizations work with experienced trainers, coaches, and service enterprise consultants, depending on the structure of the hub's operations, to build an organizational action plan to incorporate their service enterprise characteristic standards into their organization's culture, systems, and processes. So coaching needs are really determined by the organization in partnership with their coach. During coaching, they may need just some help identifying and documenting what their action plans or action steps are. They might need some additional training, and that training could be customized based on the needs of the organization, or it might be referring the organization to attend other trainings that you already offer as a hub in your community. After the training and coaching portion, and I should say that while each step is equally sized on this graphic, the training and coaching portion of the process is really where the most time is spent. So this can be a process that can take 3 months for really prepared organizations that may already be operating as service enterprises, all the way up to 18 months or 2 years for them to complete this transformation. So it really depends on the organization, but this is where the bulk of the work happens and the bulk of the time passes with the support of the service enterprise coach and the hub. Finally, once they have achieved what they have set out to achieve, they have put these systems and processes in place, worked with their coach to document all of that and provide evidence of what they're doing, of the volunteer handbook that they created, of the accountability measures that they've put in place to hold staff accountable for supervising volunteers effectively, that sort of thing. Once an organization's made significant progress towards becoming a service enterprise, they can decide to apply for certification. And so the way that they do that is they work with their coach, they provide all of the evidence of the ways in which they've implemented service enterprise best practices, and then they schedule a site visit. And typically the site visit is attended by the coach who worked with the organization along the way, as well as other representatives from the hub, where the organization has an opportunity to tell their story and demonstrate the change that has occurred in the organization. The hub and coach will talk not only to the core team that's participated in the process, but also to additional senior leadership and to volunteers who are now participating in a very hopefully new and different operation in this organization as they are a service enterprise. So at that site visit typically is about 3 hours per organization. And then the hub submits a service enterprise application, or really it's a recommendation to Points of Light that they believe that this organization is truly now operating as a service enterprise. Here are specific examples of all of the standards that they've met and some highlights of how things work in that organization. And then Points of Light officially certifies that organization for a period of 3 years. So the final piece is continuous improvement, follow-up and continuous improvement. It's a key tenet of the Service Enterprise Program that organizations make a commitment to continuous improvement. And to that end, when organizations certify, we fully expect for them to have some elements of their action plan still in progress or ongoing. The Service Enterprise certification, as I mentioned, is a 3-year certification. And at the end of 3 years, we ask organizations to apply to maintain their certification, to demonstrate that they're continuing to operate as a service enterprise. So the service enterprise theory of change is that there are these 4 key pieces in the process: the diagnostic, the training, the coaching, and then the certification. Through the diagnostic, the SED, organizations better understand their volunteer workforce and their current volunteer engagement practices, and they also understand their strengths and areas for improvement. Throughout training, organizations better understand some change management concepts and what they need to do to become a service enterprise. And they receive action planning tools to guide and document their transformation into a service enterprise. Through the coaching process, coaches provide support and accountability, as well as technical assistance to support the changes that the organization is working to create in their organization. Accountability is a big piece of that, because we know that there's never enough time for all the things on everyone's plate, and coaches really help to keep the organization motivated, excited, and moving forward on their transformation, becoming a service enterprise. And finally, certification is where they receive their official certification for 3 years. What this turns into is that orgs are now equipped with the knowledge, tools, and support that they need to sustainably engage volunteers in their organizations. They're able to create a culture of volunteerism through change management principles, and they're able to adopt norms and practices that make volunteers truly core to their operations. So that ultimately, these service enterprise organizations are powered by volunteers to achieve their social missions and contribute to a vibrant civic life and really resilient communities, as is certainly the goal for Points of Light, certainly for all of the hubs that are part of this service enterprise program. So now I'm going to turn it over to SJ to look at hub operations and what this looks like if you choose to become a service enterprise hub.
Great, and thank you so much, Tracy. Wonderful job reviewing the background, the history of service enterprise, more about the process and the benefits of participation. So what I want to walk you through is a little bit more about what it means to be a hub. And so first, just to give a little grounding, we want to show here in this graphic, you see points of light there at the top. So we're the owner of the program and we're the certifying body for service enterprise. And so we train, we recruit, we train, and we authorize independent consultants, which you see there on the left, and hubs to deliver the program in their respective communities or whatever their footprint might be. And I'll also note, you see there on the super hub, I'll explain that in a second, but essentially the consultant or the hub will recruit 2 to 3 cohorts comprised of usually 3 to 8 organizations and respective staff members from those organizations to participate in one of those process wheels. And so they'll go through it with these individual cohorts. Cohorts could be related around an issue area. They could be completely different based on the community, and just whoever's ready to go through, who's done that readiness assessment and is appropriate for the program. And so that's basically how it works structurally. And then on the right, you'll see the super hub. And basically, this would be an example of like a state service commission or maybe some national program that has a federated model where they would then have a network of their own hubs that we call sub-hubs that then work with different cohorts in their respective communities. And so those are generally the 3 types of people who are actually, or organizations or consultants that are delivering the program across the United States. And I would note that currently it is only available in the United States, since that is where our research is also based. And so just want to make that note. So as far as you can see on this map, our current landscape, so we have over 20 different hubs, and you can see them indicated by the little blue markers there. And where you see that shading, that actually indicates that there is a statewide geographic area that is being covered by a hub or in most cases, a state service commission. And if we could see the hub territories, perfect. So this is a current list of all the hubs that are operating as of 2021. And you can see that they have their own territory descriptions. We offer geographic exclusivity to our hubs or any state service commissions, whatever it might be. You'll see a number that have the states listed. And if an organization reaches out to us and there isn't currently a hub that they're in that geography, we're actually able to connect them to independent consultants who have also been trained and authorized by Points of Light to deliver the program. So the wonderful thing is it doesn't matter where you are in the US, certainly we're able to offer those options. And so because we do have a geographic exclusivity, if you have an interest in becoming a hub and you see that you're somewhere on this map, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll share our contact information at the end also, but don't hesitate to reach out just to see if that continues to be the circumstance, or to see if maybe there's a way that we can connect you to partner with the current hub, so that definitely there's arrangements where there might be referring partners, and so it'd be great to familiarize yourself with what they offer currently. And so again, hubs they're different. So it could be, we have hubs that are Points of Light affiliates like Chicago Cares, Hands-On Northwest North Carolina, that are all part of our global network of affiliates. We have state service commissions like Volunteer Iowa and Massachusetts Service Alliance, city agencies such as the Philadelphia Mayor's Office of Civic Engagement and Volunteer Service. We also worked with NYC Service, which was part of the Mayor's Office in New York City. And then of course, nonprofits such as Team Giving and Path Foundation. Organizations that are already maybe delivering volunteer engagement training or capacity building or consulting services to other people-driven organizations in their community. And then, of course, as far as let's line out the responsibilities. And so to be a hub or an independent consultant, you would sign a 2-year license agreement that authorizes you to deliver service enterprise, and we provide you access to all the tools. There's an annual licensing fee. We ask that you recruit and screen 3 to 8 organizations, so at least one cohort or a couple small cohorts, as part of your membership, because we want to grow the program. We want to reach and help as many organizations as possible. So you'll implement the service enterprise program model as outlined in the license agreement, and then use the resources and support that we'll provide you. You'll fulfill and support your annual reporting and evaluation requests. We're doing that actually right now. We send out surveys to certified agencies, organizations that have been trained to gather that important data to tell us, like, is the program making the impact that we want? Do we need to adapt anything? Add additional training. We are always looking to evolve and continue growing the program in a meaningful way. And so those stats you saw, the colorful graphics with those stats, that's because we're able to do evaluation. And so that's why it's a built-in request of the program. And of course, we also offer monthly all hub calls. So these are every single month. They're an hour and a half, and they're focused on sharing best practices, providing resources, making resource requests of points of light, or seeing if other hubs might have great information that they'd be willing to share as well. We look at it as we're a learning community, and we're stronger together, and we learn from each other and all the time. And so that is part of the benefit of participating in the program, and why you also want to make sure you attend those calls. And then we ask that you maintain the integrity of the curriculum and follow standards of excellence. No surprise there. And that you actually work to guide the organizations that you work with towards certification. Not every organization is going to be ready. Even if you did a readiness assessment, they might get into it and realize, wow, we really need to take a step back. And maybe you need to share other programs or other resources that you offer to get them more ready so that they could actually pursue certification. And that's totally okay. But we do always want to be pushing towards that level of certification, because that means we know those organizations are operating most efficiently and effectively. Some of the benefits, Tracy already kind of touched on them, but the service diagnostic tool, that you have access to that. We, of course, have our program, and it builds on the nonprofit's capacity to better achieve their missions by engaging volunteers. And so we have PowerPoints, participant materials, trainer guides, case studies, orientation, training curriculum, of course, our monthly trainings that we do. You have that network of peers that are hubs and consultants that are sharing what's been working for them, and that we can troubleshoot with and problem solve and innovate with, which is really wonderful. And then, of course, our annual impact data to document change and growth. As far as some of the support that Points of Light provides, we maintain the curriculum, the standards, materials, and again, those training guides, marketing toolkits. We offer an annual train the trainer for hubs at a nominal additional fee that lets you bring multiple staff, or maybe you have volunteer trainers or coaches that are going to be involved. Lets you bring them together so that they can learn how to actually deliver the curriculum successfully, and familiarize yourself with all the resources that are available to you. We provide technical assistance to new hubs, so 3 hours within the first 90 days dedicated to you, beyond the train the trainer. And then, of course, we're always available by email, and happy to take a call to answer some questions too. We certainly provide the SED. If an organization becomes a hub and wants to pursue certification, we'll do a SED with you. We'll do a SED debrief. We'll provide coaching and that virtual site visit towards your own certification, or to maintain your certification if it's been over 3 years. And so we'll do up to 5 hours of that. We also maintain a resource site that has all the curriculum, the templates, the case studies, recordings of all our previous training videos, the slide decks, you name it. We keep that in one clearinghouse, so it's all available to you. And then, of course, the monthly calls. As far as program costs, so I mentioned Train the Trainer. So that is that virtual training, currently offering it virtual. And so that's $550 per org. That's a one-time cost. And we encourage you to invite multiple folks to participate in that, because that is what we've seen be most successful for our partners when they have backup or more folks are aware and they don't have to do that knowledge transfer. As far as annual costs, so I mentioned there's that 2-year agreement. So each year there is an annual license fee. It's on a sliding scale. And so it's based on your hub budget. Obviously, state commission is going to have a very different annual license fee than a smaller nonprofit or an affiliate partner of ours, or even an independent consultant who doesn't have quite that same framework. And then our per item costs. That would be the service enterprise diagnostic, the SED that we've talked about. For each one of those you purchase is $380. That is payable to Points of Light. And generally you're doing one of those per organization in a cohort. And so that's, when you think about how you want to budget or kind of plan, this is what these are the item costs that you want to consider. Of course, none of this accounts for your time. That's something that you have to consider. We do have a budget planning or a business modeling worksheet that we can provide you that you can input your own information. Like if you needed to rent training space because you plan on offering it in person, or food or beverage, things like that. And so that's something that we'll provide as a follow-up that you can download and input your own metrics into. And of course, we'll provide you your annual license fee. Just send us an email, serviceenterprise@pointslight.org, and let us know what your organizational budget is, and then we can provide that back to you. As far as our hub application process this year, this is in July 2021. So reach out to us with questions if you want clarification on any of this information. Happy to have an extra phone call, discuss any of this with you to give you the clarity that you need to make the right decision for your organization. You would submit a hub application no later than August 13th. The link is provided there. And then we're going to review those submissions, Tracy and I, and probably some colleagues, conduct any follow-up and notify applicants of approval or declination by August 31st. And then our fiscal year, Points of Light, begins October 1st. And so our contract terms follow that fiscal year model. So any new contract, any new hub or independent consultant this year would begin October 1st, 2021. And the contract term will be valid through September 30th, 2023. And then, of course, the Train the Trainer that we mentioned, that will actually begin in October and probably into a little bit of November as we're laying that date, those dates out. And so generally that'll be a couple days a week across a month and a half or so, avoiding holidays, and a couple hours per session. And so that's an opportunity, again, to go through the curriculum, learn the tools, get tips for delivery from people who've done it, and they know, where people might have a harder time and where to kind of concentrate your space or your conversations and support for those organizations going through it. So with all that being said, I just want to thank you for listening to the session. We hope you learned and got some foundational information about Service Enterprise. I think that we're very fortunate to have such a powerful network of hubs, but we're always looking to reach markets, where those relationships, those community relationships are close. Tracy, would you like to share a little bit more or to help us close out?
We look forward to receiving your hub applications and reviewing those, and would love to have more hubs around the country to offer this wonderful program to organizations. So thanks for joining us today.